Okay, we are on chapter 5. Okay, so in this chapter, we are going to talk about the social influences on the self concept. How do we come to know the self, self regulation, and then self regulatory challenges. Self concept. So, this is how you see yourself and understand yourself, like your personality. Like, are you a student? Are you a friend? And also your life experiences. So, William James called this the me, what you know about yourself. Freud talked about the I, the part of you that makes choices and deals with life. So the self is both about what you know about yourself and the part of you that acts around the world and those around you. Culture and socialization help shape who we are. There are our identities, our roles, and personality traits. They also influence whether we see ourselves as independent, focused on our personal growth and strengths, or interdependent, focused on relationships and group harmony. According to the social identity theory, a big part of how we define and value ourselves comes from the social groups that we belong to, like our nationality, maybe our religion, what sports we play, right? That's big at Taper. These groups identify our self-concept. A self-schema is like a mental folder that you have in your mind that holds all your memories and beliefs and the ideas about a certain part of who you are. So stable means that some parts of this folder are always there and important for how you see yourself. Where malleable means that other parts of this folder can kind of change depending on the situation or your feeling or what's going on around you. So basically, some parts of how you see yourself stay the same all the time, which are the stable ones. Other parts can change depending on what's happening or the situation. Working self-concept is the part of how you see yourself that's active right now. It's what's on your mind and shaping how you think, feel, and act at this moment. Solo status means feelings like you're the only one who's different or unique in a certain way compared to these people around you right now. And people learn about themselves by seeing how others react to them. They use others' opinions and feedbacks to figure it out. So what they're like, their traits, how well they're doing, if they're successful or not, whether their actions are right or wrong. The ideas come from a theory called symbolic interactionism, which says we understand ourselves through our interactions with others. And looking glass self means we see ourselves like a reflection in a mirror based on how we think other people see us. And then appraisals are the actual reactions or judgment that we get from people. So let's say that you give a presentation in class. If people are nodding and kind of smiling and your teacher praises you afterwards, you might think to yourself, okay, I'm a pretty good speaker, right? That's your looking glass self. For you're forming your opinion on how you're doing based on other people's perceptions or how you think they're responding. But if people looked at you like, ugh, so boring, or maybe confused, like what, or not like nodding along with you, you might start to doubt yourself and think, oh, I'm not that good of a speaker. So your view kind of changes depending on how others respond to you. Baldwin and colleagues said that even when you're not aware of it, we carry around mental reminders of what important people in our lives, maybe teachers, close friends, parents, whoever else, think of us. So these reminders affect how we judge ourselves. So if your parent was always proud of you growing up, like for me, my dad always said, I'm proud of you, T-Bird. And so that's how I judge myself. Like I'm someone worth being proud of, right? So if someone's telling you they're proud of you, just thinking of them might make you push yourself harder or feel good about succeeding, even if they're not there. Mead said that we also form an idea of what people think in general. This is called the generalized other. It's like a mental average of society's expectation. We use it to guess kind of how people might see us and then adjust our behaviors or self-image based on that. An example would be if you're about to post something on social media, right? Instagram's big or whatever you post on. you might stop and think, okay, what are other people going to think? How are they going to see this? Is the caption good enough? Your brain's using past experiences, and that's the generalized idea of what most people would think in your mind when you post it. According to Festinger, people learn about themselves by comparing themselves to others, especially those who are similar. There are two main types. There's downward comparison, where you compare yourself to someone who's doing worse than you to feel better about yourself. So like if you're nervous on the test, then you find out a classmate did worse than you, you might feel better about yourself, right? Even if your score is low. And then there's upward comparison, comparing yourself to someone who's doing better than you. Like if your friend's really fit and goes to the gym every day and working out, right? Doing extra workouts with coach or whatever, you might feel motivated to do the same and work out more. Or it could also go the opposite way, where you might feel discouraged, depending on how you see the difference. Self-perception theory says that people figure out who they are by watching their own behavior, especially when they're not sure how to feel. They look at what they did and the situation around them to make sense of their thoughts and emotions. Like if you volunteer at a shelter and notice that you keep going back, right? You might think, I must really care about helping others. Facial feedback hypothesis says that the way your face moves can actually influence the way that you feel. Like in your brain, it changes your emotional state. In other words, your facial expressions send signals to your brain about how you're actually feeling. So if you smile, even when you're not really maybe feeling happy, or maybe you're feeling sad, but you just like hold a pencil in your mouth and smile like the guy in the first picture, you will actually start to feel happier. Likewise, if you frown, you might start to feel more annoyed or upset, even if you weren't feeling that way at first. Humans often aren't very good at guessing how situations affect their own thoughts and actions. We misjudge what's really influencing us, and sometimes we overestimate an effect. We think something had a bigger impact than it really did. Like you may think wearing your lucky shirt helped you do good on a test when really it was your studying that mattered. Or other times we underestimate an effect. We don't realize how much a situation has actually shaped our behavior. You might feel super confident in a job interview because you have a great personality. And when you get the job, you might think, it was my personality. But really, it's because the interviewer was friendly and made you feel at ease. And so this happens because our brains make imperfect guesses, which are inferences, based on limited information. We often don't realize just how much the context or environment is shaping how we think and act. The two-factor theory of emotion says that emotions come from two things. Arousal, which is how physically activated or energized your body feels, like your heart racing or your hands sweating, and interpretation, how you explain or label that arousal based on what's happening around you. So that means emotion equals arousal times interpretation. So you don't just feel something because your body's aroused. You feel an emotion based on how you understand that arousal in the moment. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard, but they say it's the same physiological response when you're about to give a presentation or when you're nervous about something versus when you're excited. So if your heart is beating and your hands are sweating, you could label that as nervous, like before a roller coaster ride. But someone else having those same responses of heart racing and hands sweating might think, I'm excited, right? So it's based on how your brain interprets it also. Sometimes your body gets worked up, like your heart beats fast, like we talked about, or you feel tense or full of energy or maybe angry or whatever you feel. And that's called arousal. And so this theory says if something gets your body aroused and then something else happens shortly after, the arousal from the first thing can spill over into how you react to the second thing, even if it's not related. So, it's my daughter. So let's say you watch a scary movie, right? Your heart's pounding, you feel jumpy. Then right after the movie, your friend says something a little bit annoying, right? Instead of brushing it off or being like, whatever, my friend's being dumb, you might just get a little more annoyed or snap at them, not just because you're mad or annoyed, but because they said it right after that intense feeling you had right from the scary movie. And so your body was already worked up, and so it felt extra intense. And so that leftover excitement got transferred into your anger. Self-regulation is the ability to control your thoughts, feelings, and actions to reach your goals. It depends on 3 key mental abilities. So self-awareness is the first thing, noticing what you're thinking or feeling, and then goal setting is the second one, deciding what you want and then kind of planning, how can I achieve this? And then mental time frame, so thinking about the past or imagining the future. So example, you're tempted to procrastinate, right? But self-regulation helps you remember your goal, stay focused, and make choices that your future self will appreciate. For this class. Construct level theory says that when people think about the near future, they focus on concrete details, like how something will happen. But when they think about the distant future, they focus on abstract ideas, like why it matters. In the short run, practical concerns are more important. In the long run, big picture or meaningful goals are more important. Effective forecasting is when people try to predict how they feel about future events. These predictions are often wrong and usually overestimated how much one thing will affect their emotions. And because of this, effective forecasting can influence the choices and actions that people make. One key to effective self-regulation is willpower, or the ability to resist temptations and stay focused on long-term goals. Hot processes are emotional and impulsive, whereas cold processes are calm and rational. Cold processes can be activated through mindful attention or by tricking ourselves into thinking we don't really care about a tempting distraction. Delay of gratification. Research shows that how well a child can wait for a reward at age 4 can predict their self-control and success even 30 years later. So teaching that to kids is very important, right? Self-control. This suggests that self-regulation starts early. People also differ in how much they think about future consequences, what affects how well they manage their behaviors over time. Someone who thinks long-term might skip a party to study for exam, right? But someone focused on a short-term reward might just go to the party and risk falling behind. Which one are you? The brain plays a big role in self-regulation, with different areas handling different tasks. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex helps process emotional information, where the orbital frontal cortex regulates social behavior, and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex helps with planning, self-control, and working toward long-term goal. The anterior cingulate cortex notices when your actions conflict with your goals. And scientists use fMRI scans to see which brain areas are active during tasks that involves thinking or decision making. Ironic processing is the idea that the more we try not to think about something, the more it actually pops into our mind. And so to control thoughts, the brain uses 2 systems: a monitor that watches for the unwanted thought and an operator that tries to distract us with something else. But when we're stressed or tired, then the operator weakens and the rebound effect happens, which is when those unwanted thoughts come back even stronger. So ironic processing, again, is when you try not to think about something, you end up thinking about it even more. But there are ways to reduce this. One way is to stay calm, try to relax, avoid stress, don't rush, don't fight the thought. So sometimes the best way to deal with the unwanted thought is to stop trying so hard to push it away and just let it be. And it'll often go away on its own. That's why with trauma, sometimes when you actually talk about it and process it, it's easier than just saying, okay, I don't want to remember that. I don't want to, don't let me think about that. Don't let me think about that. It's a painful, if you actually acknowledge it and see, okay, this is a thought I have, oftentimes it'll go away on its own. Ego depletion means that using self-control for a long time can make you mentally tired, so it becomes harder to keep making good choices. Self-control takes energy, right? Especially from glucose, which fuels the brain. And it, in particular, helps fuel the brain that deals with decision making. So if you spend all day focusing on eating healthy, avoiding snacks, and sticking to a strict diet, by the end of the night, sometimes we feel so worn out that we end up eating like a big dessert or something, right? So your self-control is more tired, so it's easier to give in to temptation. So goals are easier to reach when we make specific mental plans that connect a situation to an action. It's called implementation intentions. It means thinking, if something happens, then I'll blank, blank, blank. And over time, repeating these actions create habits, right? Which make it easier to stick to goals because they don't require as much thought or effort. They become automatic. So if your plan is, if I get home from work, then I'll go for a walk. Well, doing it regularly makes it become a habit, and so eventually you just do it automatically. Sometimes people get stuck feeling down or depressed because they keep focusing on a goal that they can't reach, right? It's unattainable. So this constant self-focus can make things worse. It can help shift goals, like thinking about the bigger picture, abstract goals, instead of just the small details, which are concrete goals. But some goals are hard to give up. So for good mental health, it's important to balance trying to find some goals that are attainable while also letting go of others that are not as attainable and maybe aren't as important. So this idea is called the self-regulatory preservation theory of depression. An example of this would be if someone wants a certain job, right, but they keep failing. They apply. Let's say like a substitute teacher. They want a position, right? They apply. They might feel depressed if they only focused on that one goal. But if they shift to a broader goal, like, okay, instead of finding my perfect high school position for teaching, I'm going to just find meaningful work or develop skills while I sub. Then oftentimes you can feel better about new opportunities that come rather than stressed.